And so, I get it. One bad review here and there, a law firm can overcome it with a bunch of positive reviews. But if you get bombarded, let's say you don't have that many total, and then all of a sudden you get bombarded with 30 or 40 that all come at once, it's pretty clear to anybody that they're related and it's not from a client that, I haven't luckily had to deal with it, but I've heard of folks, they go to Google. If you can make it through the maze and actually get in touch with somebody, get them to respond, the response is usually not all that helpful and you can feel helpless. And it could cost the firm multiple thousands of dollars, maybe six figures over time if you don't resolve it. So, you don't have to give your proprietary way, but is it possible to get Google to take them down, or do you have to sue the people?
Yeah, I think that sometimes you can get Google to take action, but it's difficult, and they don't always do everything that needs to be done.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. This is a podcast where we get to interview founding attorneys of law firms of all shapes and sizes and types. And today I'm talking to Aaron Minc. And for all the law firm owners out there, you're going to want to stick around for this one because we are going to talk about some stuff that you are definitely going to be interested in. It's something that I hear a lot of law firm owners are dealing with. I'll tease a little bit, and that's negative reviews. We're going to get to that later. That's something Aaron deals with a lot. So he's developed a pretty unique niche, and we're going to talk all about that. So Aaron, welcome to the show. Why don't you introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where you are, exactly what you do, and maybe a little bit about your firm. How big is it? That's how many attorneys, all that.
Sure. So Aaron Minc, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. That's where we're headquartered. And I originally from Akron. My firm focuses on online defamation, harassment, extortion, sextortion, and digital privacy. Basically, if something on the internet is causing you harm or having some sort of digital crisis, we can probably help with it. It just, we've got 7 attorneys, about 15, 20 employees at any given moment. We serve people nationwide and been doing this in this area for maybe, like 14 years at this point, and the firm's been around for 7.
So, one of the cool things about this podcast is I get to meet folks like you that have these really specialized niche practices that, when you hear about it, you're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But, before we met, I'm not sure I knew anybody that I could have turned to if this sort of problem arose. So how did you get into it? Is that something that you saw sort of a need and you went there, or was it just sort of by chance?
Sure. It's a long story. Kind of goes back to my origin story as an entrepreneur coming out of law school from the get-go, going into the practice of law. And, I graduated from school. There's probably a lot of lawyers out there who can commiserate with this if they graduated around that time period back in 2010 in the Great Recession. And yeah.
So I'll just say, I think that will go down in history as the worst year ever to graduate. And you know it firsthand, but yeah.
I do. And it's not a contest per se, but if it was, I think 2010 grads have gotten the worst. I've seen like these articles posted like 5 years later doing a retrospect being like, it fundamentally changed employment relationships and structures and all this stuff. And, not like 2011 or 2012 or 2009 got any worse, but yeah, I graduated in the height of it. I worked my ass off in school. Like a lot of people were like, I didn't do so great, or they did awesome. But, I'm proud of that fact, and got, I had all these summer associate things lined up from when I was in my second year summer or whatever, had all these offers. It was great. And, it was just so disappointing when I got to graduation and there was nothing there. I vividly remember like, and it was such a stark contrast at the end of my first year, getting, all these interviews, 4 or 5, and I wasn't in the top 10% or something like that, but I knew how to work the system and was a great candidate, great interviewer. I was the only one but anyways, I just remember like, it's so different. I remember just going from that to not even like looking for anything to apply to, like anything, like not like, ooh, I don't want to do that, or picking and choosing, just any job. And it was so demoralizing and depressing to have to go through that. And I went about a year. I was fortunate enough that I found a couple positions that were part-time or contract. I wound up working in-house underneath the general counsel of a very large general independent contractor in Cleveland, maybe like the second or third largest in the region, and was working like 20, 30 hours a week, most $18 an hour. Would go home at night and just blog or do, reviewing construction contracts, which that wasn't what I wanted to be doing. I wanted to be doing business litigation, being a business litigator, and just reviewing contracts. I remember I would have rather stabbed pencils in my eyeballs at the time, but I was really grateful for anything and did pick up some great skills there. Like, I don't think I would have ever gotten good at contracts had I not been in that position. And I'm really grateful for having anything during that time period, really. And I think, I hit, and I promise this is going to a more positive place eventually, but I eventually, I hit a low point about a year out after graduating where I was still in that position. And I finally got an interview. I had a bunch of interviews, but I finally got an offer to join a company, a manufacturing company, to kind of just keep reviewing contracts. It was a full-time position, benefits, but it didn't even require a JD. And for me, that was me settling. I can tell you my dad, who's a lawyer, was not happy about it, but I took it, and, I got let go 21 days later, and it sucked. And again, this is going to a more positive place, but it's part of the adversity that I've faced in my career. And that was kind of a low point for me, but it really wound up being a turning point. I went home that night, I talked to my wife, and she kind of looked at me, and she'd probably been saying this for a year at that point. Like, what are you waiting for? Right? Why don't you just go out and just practice law and do your thing, use your law license, spend all that money. And up till then, I think lawyers can commiserate, non-lawyers maybe don't understand, but when you first get into the practice of law, it's terrifying to go out and, law school kind of knocks this into your head that you don't know what you don't know, and everything like that. And, the good thing about being in that position is that it's very clarifying, and in terms of that, you don't have anything to lose, right? Like, what's the worst thing that could happen at that point? And I kind of was like, you know what, you're right. What am I waiting for? I'm capable. I can do this. I'll just reckless abandon. I'm just going to go for it. Whatever comes my way, I'm just going to figure it out and just make this happen. And it's kind of crazy. I went, I still remember I just started going to the courthouse every single day, got on the assigned counsel list, started hitting up every single office sharing classified ad that I saw in any bar journal, went and started talking to every single owner about office sharing and arrangements like that. I started applying for whatever job I found anywhere that dealt with legal help or aid, and just went at it every single day. And within 90 days, I had won my first jury trial.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
I faced off again and taking part. I wasn't doing any litigation at that point, and really hadn't since I passed the bar. And I beat a lawyer who had been practicing law, doing trials cases for like 30 years. I just literally out hustled him. I'd gotten a job miraculously at a firm. Two older gentlemen near the tail end of their career, lawyers, had left the firm that they were with and decided to start a new one. And I synced up with them in the process of kind of responding and everything. And they were looking for someone young and hungry to do all their work. And within 30 days of being there, they had sat me down and been like, hey, we got a trial coming up. You want to handle it? And it was 30 days out. And I was like, sure, why not?
Nice.
No idea, right? And it was breach of contract case. It was good. And then finally what happened too in this 90-day stretch after I kind of hit that point was I found my first online defamation client on Craigslist, of all places, which wound up being the genesis for the firm I own today, of all things.
So Craigslist, is that still around?
Right.
I mean, I remember being on there all the time, and I sold a car on there years ago, but yeah, is it even around?
It's still around. It's not what it used to be, right? It used to be pretty legit, and that's around that time when it was still pretty legit. So I had found this, and I wish I still had the ad. It was a very short ad, and it was like, old entrepreneur has some battles, some scores that he needs to settle. All right. looking for, young, hungry litigator or something like that. Not afraid to be aggressive and like sue the shit out of people or something like that.
Nice.
I'm paraphrasing this point. It was not a big ad. Right. And I applied. I still have the email that I sent, and email reply was pretty short. It was like, hi, I'm a young, hungry litigator, not afraid to sue crap out of people. Like, let's think up, and I went out there and gosh, the situation is like what they warn you about in law school, where it's like every red flag imaginable, what could go wrong, right? Like person looking for inexperienced, overly aggressive lawyer, lawyer who is desperately looking for any experience to get in the courtroom and do whatever, gosh, what could go wrong? But what was great, he had fired probably the last 5 lawyers that he'd worked with, had terrible things written about him.
That's like one of the biggest red flags out there.
Yes, right. And the first issue that he wanted me to deal with was that someone had written this terrible report about him on this website called ripoffreport.com. And he had come up with this business idea, which was pretty cool. He's like this true blue, engineer, entrepreneur type. And he'd come up with this widget that you could install in a car. And this was back again, in like 2011, 2012 at this point. And it was when Obama was in his first term and gas prices were through the roof. And everybody thought that ethanol or all these alternative fuels were going to be the wave of the future. And that was like all the rage back then. And he had started this company where you could take this widget. He was a big car guy, and you could install this widget into a car, and it would allow you to be able, for just like a couple $100, and your engine could then take ethanol, gasoline, or gas, regular gas. And it was a great idea. They got a bunch of people to get in on the funding. And unfortunately, it failed because, that did not take off. There are not ethanol, gasoline things on every corner of, right? So it shut down, and one of his investors got really freaking pissed, who had put in a sizable chunk of change and had lost all the money. Everybody lost all their money. My client lost hundreds of thousands of dollars on it. It just didn't work out. That's what happens with business ventures sometimes, right? And he had written just this scathing report on this website going after him, calling it a scam. And I did my due diligence. I looked in on it. They had spent hundreds of thousands on environmental testing and all these other lab tests to get all these certifications. And it's a long process, and nothing came to fruition in terms of the actual economy and market. So anyways, what happened eventually was that I took it on, I looked into it, and I found this what, you could call it a loophole, or just deep in the recesses of Google at that point, I found this terms of service and form where you could submit a court order if something is defamatory to have it removed from search results. Because ripoff, to back up for a second, the issue was that ripoff report never takes anything down. It's like this infamous site where if you have stuff posted, they won't remove it. You can call someone a pedophile, whatever you want. They will never take it down. And it used to be a very powerful site that ranked very high in search results. But this one exception was if you got a court order that something was defamatory, and they were protected by Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. So you couldn't sue the site. They were immune. The only thing you could do was go after the person who posted it and get monetary relief. But if you got an order with what I found saying that it was defamatory and should be removed, then Google, you supplied it to Google, they would take a look at it and they would de-index it from their search results. So that was my first kind of real client case that I developed myself, and we filed, and I got to take my first deposition by myself, which went splendid. It involved pics, by the way, which is never, a lot of cases somehow involve that sometimes. But
so yeah, when you're old, let me tell you about my first deposition.
Yeah, my first deposition. That's a whole nother story that I won't go at length about, but I knocked it out of the park. We settled almost immediately, got a stipulated judgment, and we were able to provide that to Google and get a de-index, got a great result. And the client was super happy. I got paid. It worked out really well. And after the case was over, I kind of had this light bulb moment where I was sitting there. I was like, wow, that was fun. I got a great result for the client. He went on, was able to, it was preventing him from being able to start his new ventures. Every single time he tried to get funding or tried to have his business sold, people would find that. He was losing millions. And I think within a year or two, he wound up selling his new business for like $3 or $5 million or something like that. So it really worked out for him. And it wound up that, I was like, this is great. And then I looked at the website and I kept thinking about it. And I'm like, that website has millions of ripoff reports on it. And this is like the only thing that is really, truly helpful other than paying some extortion fee to the site to remediate it, not even get rid of it. And, I'm sitting there, I'm like, wow, not only is this a unique solution that only lawyers can provide, to my knowledge, I'm one of the only lawyers in the country who's even aware of this remedy, period. I could find only like evidence of like one other lawyer who even knew about this. And I was like, I think maybe I'll just do this. I'll just do this. Like, this is fun. I like it. Let's do it. So it's kind of funny because during that time of, quasi-employment, I was so bored that I started my own blog. Like, blogging was all the rage back then. No one really knew what they were doing yet. And I had been blogging and just blogging about cases. I called it the Ohio Business Litigation Blog. And what I wound up doing, because I still had the blog active, was I put up a blog post or two about how I can do this. And the phone started to ring. And it kind of just took off from there and never stopped ringing. So
that's cool. So
yeah,
there's a few things I want to go back. There's a lot there. So first of all, sort of the adversity part that you had to go through, which sucks. I mean, it sucks.
Yeah.
But I imagine that it built some grit and more than that, but just sort of the relentlessness that now serves you probably pretty well. I mean, the early days of that, I would imagine, just having to fight through that, you get into that habit where maybe that was always you. I don't know. It's not many lawyers. So, were you always like that, or was it the adversity you went through that has sort of turned you into this?
I think I've always been a very gritty, resilient person. I've always been a hustler. I've always been an entrepreneur. That's kind of just built into my nature. I honestly think I get it from my grandfather, who was a Holocaust survivor, and learning about his story and what he went through. and how he hustled to make it out alive, and then was an entrepreneur and hustled when he got to the States to get it done. But what I think it added in maybe was a sense of pain and necessity that I would have never had before. And going through that experience for such an extended period of time, because it really started before I graduated. Like as soon as I found out that I wasn't going to get hired, no one in my class did at the firm I went to, and that there were no opportunities, that lasted probably for 2 years, 1 or 2 years before I even graduated, and then into that. So it was really like a 3-4 year period of going through that. It made me scared as hell. I don't think I slept or didn't worry for the first 5-10 years of practice, or I didn't think for a second from day to day that everything I had or was building or any money that I was making wasn't just going to disappear the next day. I operated from a place where I felt no sense of security in terms of what I thought needed to be done or how quickly things could change because I went through that. And I think I've gotten over that at this point. I don't operate from that place. It leaves to making, I think, more risky decisions, more quick decisions too. But really makes you relentless, really makes you do things, try anything, and be open to any opportunities that come your way, right? But I think that adds an extra edge into the equation. But I've always been just a very gritty and resilient, hardworking person in general.
Yeah, I could see, that fear. It could be good and bad. I mean, it's good. It'll keep you moving, but, it's probably not the way. Yeah. It reminds me, there's what's his name? Scott Wolf or somebody Wolf. He's a venture capitalist somebody. He's got some saying. It's like chips on shoulders create chips in pockets or something.
Yeah.
So he's like, he likes to find the founders that have some chip on their shoulder, but the fear is sort of similar to that too. It's like, it's just going to drive. But the other important lesson, I think, for all lawyers out there that I think is cool, the discovery of the niche. And you sort of stumble upon it. And, people stumble upon things all the time, but they don't go the next step and say, wait a second. I don't know what you did, but I can imagine you see the ripoff website, and then you've got you could do mailers to all those people on there and be like, hey, what are you doing? All of a sudden it's like, you're the guy, and it's, opportunities come and go all the time, and you just got to be sort of have your eyes open to find them. And you found one and no one else was doing it. So at least for a while back then, it was like new frontier, right?
Yeah. And really even today, my firm is really the only firm in the nation with multiple attorneys where our entire firm and the entire practice that we have is exclusively devoted to this area of law as our niche in terms of our expertise. And it really makes a difference when all your assets, all your resources, all your people, that's the only area they're focused on. There are other attorneys now that maybe that's part of their practice or it's one person out there, but it's a big firm and maybe it's like one person and it's all or part of their practice. I don't know. And then you have random law firms that just decide to put up an internet defamation. Like almost every other firm has that nowadays because, one time they helped with an issue or something like that. But, my assessment of the situation is we're really the only firm in the nation, albeit the world, that does what we do and stand alone from that perspective.
Well, that's a good place to be. And I like that kind of, if a firm can find that kind of niche and basically plant the flag and be the only one, I mean, that's awesome. But I want to shift a little bit. So I read maybe on your bio that, this is what you do, but you've also, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, you've been sort of a victim of online defamation yourself. So tell me about that, if it's right or wrong, but I would imagine if it happened to you, that also adds sort of an element where you can better empathize with your clients. Say, look, it's happened to me too. So maybe talk me through that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of funny. I've been defamed multiple times. It's just the nature of being a defamation lawyer and what I do. some of the crazy cases we go up against, like these crazy psychopaths sometimes in these exceptional situations. It's just that, what do nutso people do nowadays? They go after people online. They put up ridiculous shit. There's no screen, there's no filter. And digital world now has just all the weapons at their disposal just to maliciously attack and go after people. So I feel like after maybe a year or two going into this practice, I realized that at some point someone's going to come after me. And it is because of my clients. And this happens to other lawyers in other cases. If they take on controversial clients or things like that, they can have these things. But, the people sometimes who I'm suing, they have no boundaries. They have no ethics. They don't operate sometimes under the normal paradigm of what we consider right and wrong occasionally too. And then I've just had very random acts of defamation sometimes where people are being victimized by defamation and they see me and my firm out there, and maybe there's something a little wrong with them. They could be very smart, maybe too smart, maybe very malicious. And they're the kind of type of like pro se who gets some sort of conspiracy theory in their head. And between, if they're smart enough, I've wound up being hit with litigation a few times that has been easy to get rid of. But other times, drive by just wild allegations and attacks. But circling back to what you said, I have had cases where, sometimes it's more trivial and obvious that it's fake and it's easier to take care of. Like someone will post something that's just truly absurd and ridiculous, or they're just a troll. Like I had a case one time where someone posted on there, another attorney, and what's crazy too is that usually almost all the cases are ones where I have no involvement in the case. Like it's someone else at my firm, right? And they didn't do anything wrong, but for whatever reason, they don't attack the lawyer, they just attack me. So like I had a case one time where there was a business that provided services to furries. I'll just put it that way. Was our client. And I don't know if you know about furries, people who, and that, with defamation, you always wind up with these very crazy, almost comical type stories and scenarios where they had very serious allegations against them by their employees. And we had sent out a cease and desist letter. My employees did, and it didn't go over well, and the community did not like us. And all of a sudden we started getting hit with some Google reviews. And there was one in particular that claimed that they were playing a tuba outside a Dunkin' Donuts and that I had decided to go urinate in the tuba while they were playing, and that they managed to finish playing their song. It was like the Star Spangled Banner or something and that they didn't like me for that reason. And then they registered the domain like mincstinks.com and all this. Anyway, that's more like a troll situation where, eventually we took care of it. The person had mental issues. It was once they got counsel, which was, thank God, for free, we were able to resolve it really quickly. But I've had others that are much more serious where they come after me and I've had to litigate. I litigate all of them. I don't know why. I don't know what people are thinking. Like going after a defamation attorney, like defaming, like that blows my mind in of itself. It's like if I picked the fight with a kickboxer, It's like, what do you think's going to happen? Right?
Yeah.
Of all the lawyers to do this to, like, why? But it really does. I think what a lot of lawyers, especially corporate lawyers, and even ones where you're typically just suing, and really it's not about the person on the other side, it's the insurance carrier, right? They're just trying to get compensation from it. It comes down to money. And I think family attorneys can commiserate and would understand this, but for more than 90% of the cases that I deal with, it isn't really about money. I mean, don't get me wrong, costs are important. We get financial recovery in a lot of the cases that we deal with, but it's about reputation. It's about stopping ongoing harm. It's about principle. It's about the fact that you are being harassed. Someone is doing something to you or your business in a way that you cannot let it stand, or is pulling one over on you. And there is a desire to, like, there's a feeling, my clients have a very significant sense of injustice about the situation, and they want resolution. It could be that there's an anonymous person attacking them, or, just a customer that is harassing and extorting them in a way that they will not let stand, or, it really, really varies. But from my experience being defamed, I know what those feelings are like. And I know how personal it is. I know how triggering it is, how frustrating it is, how helpless you can feel in those types of situations, and how more than just getting some sort of legal relief, the ultimate goal is about getting peace of mind in terms of finding resolution. So, having gone through that myself, it's very easy for me to empathize and communicate and understand where my clients are. And oftentimes you don't even realize it. Like, everyone's got kind of like a different threshold for this stuff. Some people, it doesn't faze them at all. They don't care. It's very objective. It doesn't bother them. But for a lot of people, they don't know. And then once it happens to them, they're like, it drives them crazy, and it sends them in circles. It makes them angry. It's their reputation on the line. And, I don't let that stuff stand. I had a woman one time accuse me of trying to kill someone, have her killed, that I gave confidential information to someone, some hate group that was trying to assassinate her. And I said, when that happened, I was like, hell no, I'm not living in a world where someone is ever going to question or believe for one moment or give any veracity to that type of allegation. Litigated for 3 years and did not resolve the case until she signed an affidavit admitting that there was absolutely no basis to the allegations, and she apologized. The primary goal of that case was not money. So
nice. Yeah.
Anyway, that was a long answer to that.
No, well, you mentioned, one of the things you mentioned were, and I mentioned earlier, are negative reviews. And, probably most of the lawyers listen to this, if you own your own firm, especially if you're consumer facing, at some point you've probably gotten at least one negative review. And a lot of times they are false, unfair. It may not even be from a client. Sometimes I've heard stories. I know you've heard them all, but I've heard the stories where maybe a client's pissed, or maybe a potential client that you don't even do their practice area, and they're mad that you didn't take their case. And then they go onto a Facebook group or somewhere else, and then they get all their friends to just bombard you all at once with all these negative reviews. And then you can't do anything about it. It feels like Google won't do anything. And, these platforms that basically won't do anything. It feels like it. And it's so hard to get to the place. So for all the attorneys out there who've had this experience, what kind of advice can you give folks? I mean, how do you deal with this thing?
Sure. And this is what we focus on all day. We represent attorneys, tons of attorneys in different capacities to deal with Google reviews, attacks. We tackle removing anything from the internet, but with reviews, it's difficult and really unfair for lawyers because you can't even respond because of confidentiality and
Exactly.
rules. And it's just really unfair, and it can be a hornet's nest, and you can get yourself in trouble if you don't do things in the right way. I have a framework that I do a presentation on that I usually advise people to take, and it's kind of like a 3-step escalation process for how you kind of have to sit, what you do when you get hit with one of these things. And at the outset, the first step is just preserve it, figure out what the hell is going on. Right? Is it a real customer, fake customer? Is there any validity to what they said? Are there any communications that happened? Is it an ex-employee? What the hell even happened? Then you kind of need to assess how harmful the thing is, right? Is this something that is just your run-of-the-mill, I'm unhappy, and it's an opinion, and it's not really legally actionable, and it isn't that harmful and is on a platform where not many people see it. And it's a one-off situation where they aren't going to come back and do it again. It isn't repeating. It isn't escalating. And, for those types of situations, my normal advice would be just to handle it like any other business at that point. Do good customer service, figure out what the hell is going on, apologize and make amends if something got screwed up, reply to the review in a way that you are, professional, don't breach confidentiality, keep it clean, generic, and then do online reputation management, get good reviews. It's hard, but you got to do it, and you got to keep your rating up high. And that it's not really that big of a deal if you have a couple bad reviews, or you're anywhere between a 4.5 and a 5 in terms of your rating. That's an acceptable standard in the marketplace for most people. So with that, with those types of things, that's kind of where you can escalate it through Google if you can't resolve it, right? In other situations, what you're saying where you don't know who it is, where the allegations in the review are serious, where they're posting on multiple platforms, where they seem to be escalating, where they're being extortionate, where they're harassing you and your business, where, there are any number of different scenarios that can arise. That's where I kind of recommend taking more action legally about that. And there are options, just because it isn't, we've had cases where we've gotten things where people don't necessarily know all the ins and outs of defamation. They think one thing or the other, and they don't think they can do anything about it. And in most situations you can. We write a letter. A lot of people just don't want to deal with the source either, or it isn't worth it, right? If someone's going to hire me to do something, we charge thousands of dollars, but we can get results in a lot of cases. And if it's something where it's serious allegations of misconduct, or this is going to stay with you for a while, or it's just something by principle that you can't let stand, then you really do need to do something with it about it at the end of the day. And then, finally, you can escalate things as all the way to a lawsuit if it gets to that. And we do those types of cases all the time. Most of them resolve pretty quickly. We are able to, if we don't know the identity of someone, how do you stop someone from attacking you if you don't even know who they are? Right.
Yeah. How do you do that?
Right. So
when you get these anonymous 1-stars that are trashing you that you don't even know who it is,
yeah.
Probably a former employee or something.
Yeah. It could be your competitor. It could be someone else. And
true. Yeah.
Yeah. And in those types of cases, what we're able to do is subpoena. We can file something called a John Doe action, and we subpoena the platforms where the reviews were posted on. We can get user information, emails, phone numbers, registration, other registration information. The real pay dirt is the IP logins. And then we can follow up and figure out what ISPs are tied to the logins and do identification. It's not perfect, but in any case where we've got fresh data or a whole bunch of data points, like they're doing multiple reviews on multiple platforms, we identify successfully who's behind this stuff, probably in 80-90% of situations. When it's old, when you're dealing with someone where it's a very sophisticated person who knows how to cover their tracks, or it's a hacker, we're not wizards. There are ways to actually be 100% anonymous if you are careful about it. So those are unresolved, but there are ways to get to the bottom of these things. So
I get it. One bad review here and there, a law firm can overcome it with a bunch of positive reviews. But if you get bombarded, let's say you don't have that many total, and then all of a sudden you get bombarded with 30 or 40 that all come at once, it's pretty clear to anybody that they're related and it's not from a client that, I haven't luckily had to deal with it, but I've heard of folks, they go to Google. If you can make it through the maze and actually get in touch with somebody, get them to respond, the response is usually not all that helpful, and you can feel helpless. And it could cost, it could cost the firm multiple thousands of dollars, maybe 6 figures over time if you don't resolve it. So, you don't have to give your proprietary way, but is it possible to get Google to take them down, or do you have to sue the people?
Yeah, I think that sometimes you can get Google to take action, but it's difficult and they don't always do everything that needs to be done. And in a lot of cases, the issue is not Google. Like everyone wants to look at Google as the easy answer. Google's just the intermediary. They don't know. And what you really need to do in those cases, if you really want to stop what's happening, is you need to get to the source. Not dealing with the source and just blaming it on Google and thinking Google's the solution. It's kind of it's misanalyzing the situation and avoiding the hard problem, right? And if you don't deal with the source, you don't deal with the person who did that to you, they're still out there. God forbid you get everything down, it's great. But then they're just going to come back and do it again, right? You got to deal with the problem. So if it's a situation where it's unresolved, they're going to keep escalating. You don't know who's at the bottom of it. You really got to figure out who's doing it, and you really got to get to the source to be able to truly stop it.
Yeah, scary stuff. I know it is of high interest to a lot of lawyers out there. So thanks for taking us through that. Real quick, thanks for listening. If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. Now back to the show. So another thing, shifting gears a little bit, another thing, that you do that we talked about, I don't know, when we met several weeks ago.
Sorry to go back, and you may find this really interesting. The audience might. I'm dealing with a case right now where we're representing a PI firm out of Texas. He's given us an endorsement. I can talk about this. Amaro Law out of Houston. His firm got hit. It was over over like a 3-month period. Every day, 2-3 reviews went up. He had a stellar online reputation, 5-star, in Google reviews, over 1,400, 1,500 reviews. And some, we don't know who yet, but some competitor obviously wanted to manipulate that and take him down a notch. And what he experienced was every day for that period of time, 2-3 reviews went up every single day. They tried to be real tricky with Google's algorithm, and they would put reviews up that were 3 stars, 2 stars, pretend they were clients, say good things, but they never called, or they would pretend, right? And they put up exactly 100 reviews to the T. Someone clearly just bought like a package of 100, right? And we were able, and when it gets to that level, sometimes Google doesn't, sometimes they take some down initially, sometimes they don't. And we were able to get to the bottom of it. The person who did it was very careful. And we were able to they screwed up on one day, on one account with one login. And we were able to get those, it was a lot of work to get all the IPs, but we figured out the one slip up and we were able to nab them. And, we're going to trial on that in November.
Is that a competitor hired somebody and you know who they hired, or you know who the competitor is?
We don't know who the competitor is. That's what seems to be the situation, but we know who, based off the IP evidence and everything else, who registered the accounts and posted the reviews.
Well, I'll tell you, if you find out that competitor, they may not be a lawyer anymore.
You'd be surprised. I mean, I've dealt with similar stuff in Cleveland, Ohio. Was representing 2 firms. He got hit with a wave of negatives all at once. And we were able to track it down. And, 4 criminal defense firms had all got hit with a wave of negatives in the same area at the same time. And they all had very similar or identical IP addresses. We noticed some very suspicious activity going on with one competitor in particular. And when we started looking into it, the IPs were the same across accounts. So when we subpoenaed some of the competitors' positive reviews, they wound up having the same IP addresses as the ones that had posted the negatives, right? And by the way, when we started looking at it, there were, thousands or hundreds to 1,000 plus fake reviews across all their locations, and they looked really legit. They're using the AI. You cannot tell that they're fake. And what was worse, really was the cherry on top, was they were responding to all of them as if it was the owner of the firm. I'm sure it was just, maybe it was him. Maybe it was his marketing company was responding being like, thanks for the endorsement. Like, it'd be like, hey, this guy is the most wonderful lawyer ever. He was so thoughtful with my case, got a great result. He'd be like, we get the IPs. It goes back to like India, China. And, he's responding. He's like, thanks, Regina, I'm so glad, we got that great result. I'm so happy I could help you. Right. It's like unbelievable.
Well, that brings up another thing. I don't know how this fits into your practice, if at all, but the new FTC rule about the fake and purchase reviews. I don't know. Do you deal with that at all on either side?
Yeah, there's no private remedy for that. So you can report it at the FTC. We don't really have much involvement. It maybe helps for deceptive and unfair trade practices arguments if you're ever to sue a competitor over that. But it's very state by state still in terms of remedies.
Cool. So I do want to shift, because another thing we had talked about before is I want to talk about some of your service offerings. So we've talked a lot about the online defamation, litigation, all that stuff, but something that's very interesting to me personally is just subscription offerings. And I think you offer some, or maybe you're adding some, or maybe both. Maybe take me through that, and how did you come up with those offerings, and just take me through the process.
Sure. So I'm an entrepreneur at heart, first and foremost, and something that just drives me wild about legal practice in general and the business model is hourly billing. I just hate it. I hate it to its core, but I can't escape it either, is probably the problem. So I'm always trying to come up with ways to try and get ways around that, and have experimented with subscription services from time to time with moderate success in different areas. But one of the areas that I've been focusing on with my business is we have kind of ancillary non-legal service offerings, or non-legal services that we offer in addition to, or that supplement what we're doing. So we, in addition to doing, we're going to try and figure out who it is or get it down. And sometimes that's not always possible. Sometimes someone contacts us about a bad news article. Everything's factual, right? Things like that. You can't really do anything about it. So we offer online reputation management services where we're able to help clients produce positive information and suppress that in search results. And there are options that we do with that, but sometimes they just aren't successful, right? So we offer that, and that's on a subscription basis. We offer digital privacy monitoring services on a subscription basis, where we monitor basically someone's entire digital footprint in terms of, what their digital identity is, their dark web, online, physical threats. It's kind of like an alarm system for your digital identity and world, where if someone messes with it, you get an alert, and then you can do something about it, right? So I'm always looking at that, and just have gone in a little bit into the non-legal space to combine what I'm doing with that supplements and adds value, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I love talking to lawyers that see some problems that can be solved that are ancillary to the legal. There's so many of those. I mean, almost any practice area, you could think of one or two of those, but lawyers often just don't pursue it. I don't know. They're too busy. I don't know. They're just not thinking about it. So I love talking to people that are thinking about it and trying it out. So that's pretty cool. I know I don't want to use up all our time on that, but there's another topic that I think I came across. Are you writing a book? Did I read that somewhere?
I am. It's called Digital Intrusion. And it's really just about helping people, providing client stories, information, practical advice for how you can protect yourself in the online digital age that we live in, with all this online harassment, sextortion, everything else. The book's in process. We're looking to maybe at May potentially, or June next year as the publication date or the release date. I was able to link up with big publisher, Wiley. So I'm working.
Oh, wow. So this is a real book.
Yeah, this is a real book.
Did you get an advance? So this is
no,
big time?
I'm a first-time writer. Yeah. I'm losing money on this for sure. But yeah, I wouldn't say losing money, but I'm going that route. Obviously there's merits to going either way, but my mom is an English professor, retired, and she just is a very big snob about it. And when she heard I was writing a book, she's like, no son of mine's going to go some self-publishing route. She's very old school about it. She's like, you've got a great topic. There's a publisher that's going to want this. I promise you, just go pitch it, and I spent like a year working on a proposal, which is really interesting for a nonfiction book. You don't actually have to write it. You just have to, it's like a business plan for a book. And you put together a really good one and then you send it, and they like your business proposal for a book, and then they'll sign you. So it's pretty cool.
It's cool. So I just interviewed a friend of mine here in Atlanta, a criminal lawyer named Justin Spiesman, and he's a ghostwriter on the side. And we were talking a little bit about proposals and all that. It's really fascinating and completely unknown to me, but I think that's really cool. It's a legit publishing house. I mean, most of the time when I hear somebody's writing a book, like I'm in the middle of writing a book, Wiley's not picking it up.
Yeah, no, I was shocked. They're like most years they're like a top 10 publisher, if not top 5 in terms of size. So I was elated, and most important, my mom was happy. So that was the only thing that mattered, right? And,
That's right.
So wouldn't have done it without her support and encouragement. So it was great.
Well, cool. So, you've been at this for a while. We talked about the adversity and the growth and sort of spotting of opportunities and all that. For other law firm owners out there or wannabe law firm owners, looking back over your career and the life of your firm, do you have any advice? Is there anything maybe you'd say, I wouldn't do that? Or maybe there's something you say, yeah, I would do that, but do it a lot sooner? Any words of wisdom?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if it's a new lawyer, it's kind of crazy for me looking back. It was like I was on the cusp of getting hired so many times. Obviously, there were overriding factors that prevented that in the economy looking back. But it was crazy because the moment I flipped the switch or I made the decision that I was going to work for myself, it went from just this like struggle where I couldn't find anyone to work for. But as soon as I did that and I just was like, hey, it's just me, I'm working for myself now, everyone wanted to work with me. And it was just kind of crazy. Like people all of a sudden just started calling me out of the woodwork, even as a new attorney with barely any experience. It was like a switch flipped, right? And in retrospect, I think it's like you got to go where it's easy, and whatever is easy or makes sense in your life, in the universe, that is kind of like their signal. That's what you should do. Like one of the biggest mistakes that I'm happy I made in retrospect, but I would have told myself, and even now I know now was a mistake, was like back in law school, there was a firm where great firm. I was the only kid to get an on-the-spot offer to join them right then and there in the first initial interview because I was able to blow them out of the water with some stuff I'd researched and found and impressed them. And in retrospect, when you have an excitement level and people who really like you and you have that connection and you feel the vibes are right? It's easy. It makes sense. Like it's just, there's excitement behind it. Like don't ignore that. Like you got to jump on that. Those moments don't always come around a lot. And when you can find those partnerships with people, it's so important not to ignore that and not just take some, what I did instead was I was like, oh no, let me evaluate these other offers. And, I think if I would have went with that firm, I don't know what the hell would have happened, but I think I probably would have been employed. I think they love me. I think it would have been a great fit in retrospect. And I didn't appreciate I just didn't know. Right. And just when there's an excitement and there's a connection, you just got to go with it. And if you're in a position and you're seeing that connection and that excitement somewhere else in some moment in your life, just go for it. Right. Like there's usually a reason, and don't ignore it. Like don't be all cold and objective and be like, oh no, I have to wait. I have to evaluate all these other choices and think things through. Like if something's a hell yes, pull the trigger immediately. You don't need to hesitate. you know?
And that is really great advice. I don't know if I've ever heard anybody say that. That is dead on. So yeah, really good stuff. All right, man. So you've been at it for a while. I like to ask this question too. So looking towards the future, what's your vision, man? What do you want to achieve at this firm or somewhere else or in your life, whatever it is? What's your vision?
I'm trying to grow the business. I love business. I love my business. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm getting into some partnerships and ventures with some other companies, trying to grow the digital risk protection service that we have into a larger, more robust and valuable offer. And that's going to be taking off soon. I'm talking with a couple of reputation management companies about becoming a joint owner in that. And I'm, for the past 7 years, I've been maybe 5 years actually, I kind of shifted my role in the firm and wasn't doing any legal work at all, and was just trying to do the CEO gig, the operator gig, the marketer gig. And now I'm shifting mindsets. I'm getting in the weeds. I'm trying to be that expert. I want to be the face of the firm, but I don't want to, where I'd like to be now is just not involved in any of the operational type stuff. I want to be founder, attorney, and entrepreneur in terms of these ventures and these businesses, and let other people make it happen. And I just love representing clients, and I'm really good at it and have a lot of expertise that's unique and can do a lot of good. I love getting results for people, figuring out who's getting defamed, who's behind that anonymous mask. And that's what I just, I'm probably going to do that for the next 5 or 10 and try to get in the weeds of things and find really good people to really run things for me at this point, rather than just trying to run it myself and getting out of the weeds. I've done a reversal,
That's cool. Well, the good thing is when it's your firm, you can decide what you want to do, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
that's cool. So, all right. So for any attorneys out there that may be dealing with some of these online issues, some of the bad reviews or anything like that, or if they just want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to find you?
I think just go to our website, minclaw.com, reach out to us by phone, contact form, give me an email at aminc@minclaw.com. And, we've got a great team, intake team. And look, if you found me on the podcast, as long as you don't have a whole ton of stuff to look at and review, we usually charge $500 for a consultation, as long as it's not super in-depth or complicated or something like that. I will just mention this and I will give you, as a professional courtesy, especially if you're another attorney, a freebie on that. So just reach out. My team will help you with it, gather all the information, and we'll set you up and we'll talk. So
awesome, Aaron. I appreciate you coming on, man. It's been fun.
And I love your podcast too. I've been listening to leading up to all the people you've on. It's really interesting stuff, especially for any law firm owner, to hear what's going on. So great job.
Well, I tried it. Thank you. I try to get folks that are doing cool stuff like you. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.